This week's tariff news is the latest sign that Europe can't be sure of US support. But what does that mean for its defence? This is Macro Matters, and we're talking European defence. President Trump's policies on trade and security have undermined decades of old certainties in Europe that the US would come to its aid, leading the European Union and the UK to pledge massive increases in defence spending. There are big questions, though, over how European countries can procure enough arms to meet their goals, given that much of their current defence procurement comes from the US. Well, Rebecca Harding is CEO of the Centre for Economic Security. Rebecca, European NATO countries have made big funding promises, but can they pay for it?
I don't really think it's a question of whether or not they can pay for it. It's that they have to pay for it. So they have to find a way of paying for it that doesn't spook markets. Now, markets are pretty spooked at the moment. Over the last 48 hours, it's been quite a rough ride for markets, and that's classic British understatement. So I think we're getting to a position now where Europe does realise it needs to spend money on this. We are going to have to find a way of doing it that crowds in private investment as well as public sector money and funds all of this in a way that doesn't spook the markets even further.
Providing the money, though, is only half the question, isn't it? With the cash, how much is it then possible to scale up Europe's own defence supply to meet these goals?
I think that's a $1 trillion question, almost quite literally. So there is a lot of discussion at the moment around the core problem here, which is that even with a large amount of money going into defence at the top, the way in which stuff is procured and the length of time it takes to deliver on a supply chain is too long to be able to create a sort of, if you like, rapid response to the challenges that we face. So what we have to do is effectively look at this from a top-down perspective. What do we need at the top levels? And what do we then need to do in order to be able to create supply chain resilience and supply chain preparedness? And that's the key thing. So we need a very flexible, almost like a war economy type structure for all of this in order to get the funding to start flowing very, very quickly indeed.
Concretely, then, what should European leaders do?
Concretely, they've already committed resources to all of this. So there's 800 million that's gone into defence spending from the European Union. The German government, even before it's taken power officially, has completely altered the German constitution. So I think we are all aware of the fact that we need to do something. And Marco Rubio has been in Brussels recently, and he is very firmly saying European nations need to hit the 5% of GDP spending that they are saying. This is going to be really difficult against the backdrop of tariffs that we're seeing at the moment, because growth expectations are going to be changed by that environment as well. But I think what's really, really interesting and what we have to focus on is the need to think about how to allocate that funding in order to crowd in private investment. Now, there are several ideas that are beginning to emerge across Europe, the most powerful of which at the moment is a multilateral defence funding structure, which is called the Defence Security and Resilience Bank. That bank is set up as a multilateral organisation. It solves for a huge number of problems because it allows governments to borrow more without spooking markets. They invest in it, so it's an investment rather than an expenditure. What that means is that we can then take that money as an investment on government balance sheets, so it doesn't create more debt. And then it creates AAA, low-cost borrowing, but it also allows private sector companies to get involved because it creates a guarantee structure. And that guarantee structure means that government spending isn't used all the time. Private sector spending is funded.
The US tariffs announced this week could disrupt defence supply chains, though couldn't they? And European leaders seeking a negotiated deal with Washington might also promise to spend some more of that money buying US weapons. Would that be a mistake, do you think?
I don't know if it would be a mistake necessarily, because at the moment it is absolutely clear that the EU needs the US. And, NATO is a very strong and very, very powerful alliance. We should not be talking about doing stuff entirely by ourselves. We ought to be opening doors and allowing a way of conversation to be carried on so that we can continue to talk about collective defence, even though, as you said at the beginning, this is something that we cannot guarantee under Article 5 anymore, but we ought to look at Article 2 actually of the NATO treaty, which is where we should be looking at economic measures to work together. Now, the US government is actually very transactional on this. The US government is likely to see some very positive outcomes if Europe starts looking at financial structures to support its own defence. If other NATO countries and NATO partners, we're looking at Japan, Australia, India, all sorts of other parts, Canada as well. We need to think very, very carefully about how we do this together, because actually, if the material fact is that there is a conflict on the borders of the European Union. The European Union was set up to guarantee peace between countries in the European Union. So, that was the whole purpose of the Treaty of Rome. Those institutional structures don't work in the current modern environment of warfare and conflicts, because we have a war on our doorsteps. We now need to pull together to be able to defend ourselves. And, if America has thrown that type of question mark over everything to the Europeans and to other NATO members, then actually there is some justification in saying, well, let's sort this out. And then, because it's a financial solution, it's the language that the current administration speaks.
That was Rebecca Harding of the Centre for Economic Security. Don't forget, you can watch more videos on Reuters.com.